As Donald continues to attempt a hostile takeover of DC and threaten other cities with military action, some of his worst policies are flying under the radar. Today, I want to talk about the ways in which Donald and his Department of Education, under Secretary Linda McMahon, is dismantling our education system in ways that will hurt our children for generations to come. The DOE's policies are already starting to have a detrimental impact on our students as they head into the 2025-26 school year. The Center for American Progress, an independent, nonpartisan policy institute, released an analysis detailing just how this is all unfolding. They say Donald and McMahon have already taken steps to diminish the federal government's role in public education. While funds to school systems are being illegally withheld, ICE agents are being allowed to raid K through 12 public schools, and curricula are being threatened. For example, Donald has demanded schools change their curricula or face major budget cuts. The fact that law prohibits such interference by the federal government in local school districts, for example, it cannot influence public school curricula, instruction, staffing, or text materials, doesn't seem to matter because so far these efforts have continued unimpeded. This year alone, Donald issued an executive order directing the Secretaries of Education, Defense, and Health and Human Services to create a plan to eliminate federal support for the inclusion of DEI and gender identity in K through 12 school materials. Taking things even further, the Department of Education announced it considers DEI programs discriminatory and threatened to withhold federal funds from any state or district that continues to operate them. Just as a reminder, DEI stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. It is meant to combat bigotry and discrimination. Donald has called also to eliminate the Department of Education entirely, which would defund state public schools in disastrous ways that would have a massive negative impact on all of our children, but especially on those who are economically disadvantaged or disabled. According to analysis from the Center for American Progress, quote, since assuming office, the Trump administration has rescinded or frozen more than $10 billion in support for K through 12 education. While some funds have been released, the administration continues to withhold more than $4 billion for programs that K through 12 public schools need to ensure a successful academic year, including those that support teacher effectiveness, school-based mental health services, and long-term academic recovery from the pandemic, unquote. Schools are not just places where children go to learn. They are places where they can get help that they would not otherwise have access to in terms of mental health or getting a good meal or recovering from traumas like COVID or extra help to catch them up in subjects in which they've fallen behind due to illness or absence or some other reason. Many of Donald's own voters don't seem aware of what they were voting for back in 2020, 24, which seems to be a running theme. Education budgets are getting slashed wholesale, and in an ironic twist, red states will be hit the hardest, thus hurting the children of the people who voted Donald into office in the first place. The Trump regime has also embraced the proposals in Project 2025 to phase out Title I funding for low income school districts. The New York Times reports that, quote, Donald has laid off more than 1,000 workers at the Department of Education and ordered his education secretary to put herself out of a job by shutting down the department. The White House's proposed budget would cut education spending by 15% next year, a move some critics see as only the beginning of more efforts to slash funding, unquote. For Walker County, Alabama, a Trump voting district, that means losing about $1.1 million a year for essentials like after school meals, teacher mentoring, and enrichment programs that families can't replace with local taxes. Again, schools are not just simply to teach our children how to read, write, and do arithmetic. They are places where children go to supplement things that their families cannot provide for them or that are not available in their broader communities. Donald may claim that his primary goal here is reining in bureaucracy, something about which he cares nothing. But in reality, he's harming Republican leading states like Alabama, where federal money makes up 12% of the education budget. And it is worth pointing out again the irony here. The people who are doing the most harm to American citizens are the people who are being kept in power by those hardest hit by the Trump regime's most egregious and cruel policies. They keep voting to give power to the Donald Trumps of the world, to Alabama senators Tommy Tuberville and Katie Britt, who time and time again show us very clearly that they don't care at all about their constituents, whether they voted for them or not. Time and time again, they will vote against educating our children, feeding our children, providing decent health care for our children. And time again, voters of states like Alabama say, great, I'm going to keep voting for you anyway. But of course, Donald is also setting his sights on schools in Democratic leaning districts, especially if they don't conform to the right wing ideologies that fuel his base. Recently, the Department of Health and Human Services, led by sociopath Robert Kennedy, warned 40 states to drop quote unquote gender ideology from public schools or lose federal funding. Here's a WFXR News Virginia report on this story.
Well, the Health and Human Services Department is warning 40 states they may lose federal funding over gender ideology issues taught in schools. Now, that includes West Virginia and North Carolina, but not Virginia. Trump administration is pushing for changes to sex education in public schools. Now, federal law says any curriculum aimed at reducing teen pregnancies and the spread of STDs must be medically accurate and age appropriate. Federal health department officials claim some states are trying to indoctrinate students.
Young children are incredibly impressionable, so teaching them that some boys are born in girls' bodies only leaves an impression that will poison their minds and make them confused as they grow into adulthood.
Last week, California lost more than $12 million in sex education funding because it failed to comply. Now another $81 million is at stake for schools across the country.
There is no indoctrination going on in our public schools. And we certainly shouldn't take the word of the Trump regime to tell us otherwise, because this is the party led by a man who, during the 2024 presidential election, scared his base into believing, erroneously, that schools were not only engaged in supporting gender affirming care, schools were carrying out gender reassignment surgeries. I'm paraphrasing here, but Donald used to say things like, you send your boy to school in the morning and he comes home a girl. That is insanity. These people are engaging in the most cruel bigotry against one of the most vulnerable populations on the planet, all to justify their stealing money from our public schools so they can keep our children uninformed and ignorant about many things, including our history. The Trump regime's Department of Education is threatening to cut federal funding to Denver public schools unless they revoke policies that allow transgender students to use bathrooms matching their gender identity and maintain gender-neutral restrooms. Officials gave the district 10 days to comply, warning of, quote, imminent enforcement action, unquote, if they fail to take action. This is incredibly cruel stuff, and I think blue states need to stand strong against such incursions into their autonomy. But there's something else that we need to keep in mind here. There's a pettiness at work that should remind us that this is not what the federal government is for. Keep your hands off our bodies, keep your ideologies out of our public schools, and stay the fuck away from our children. Please take a second and like and share this video. Be awesome if you could subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, please follow us and give the show a 5-star rating because it really does help other people find our content. Thanks.